adenomyomatosis, or if the patient is, apart from that, if there is any anomalous pancreaticobiliary union, or a presence of multiple stones, large stones, and typhoid carriers. And then role for PTBD for the management of biliary stricture. The role of PTBD in the management of biliary stricture would be if for those cases with proximal. So we divide this into benign and malignant. In malignant, all cases beyond 3B, as per the Bismuth classification, would be in malignant would be candidates ideally for PTBD, as these have been found to be difficult to drain endoscopically. And apart from that, in benign, sir, for those in whom failed ERCPs, or where we don't have a center where EUS guided drainage is available, in those cases, or high proximal strictures, these patients can benefit from PTBD, sir. Role of EUS, sorry, ma'am. Hepaticogastrostomy. Yes. Role of EUS in hilar strictures, again, ma'am, malignant and benign. In here, these patients usually it is easier to approach the left-sided biliary system as compared to the right side. So it would be preferable in 3B cancers and beyond. And it can also be used in failed ERCP, and where it is an or altered anatomy where we cannot approach through ERCP also.
Karthik, in this particular patient, do you think any role for EUS?
In this particular patient,
no indication. This should not do EUS.
No, sir.
We are
Yes,
not
sir, not required.
Another question
so
is,
if we didn't have the history of gallbladder surgery, and if it was an indeterminate, then maybe an intraductal ultrasound, but still not EUS. Yes,
that is different.
Last question.
Last question. Is there any role for cholangioscopy? In other words, only because you have got gadgets, you need not do everything. So what is the role of any role for cholangioscopy in this patient?
In post-cholecystectomy, no, sir. No, sir.
No, it may not be correct. There is a role.
No,
when you do an ERCP, you fail to cannulate and you fail to pass the guidewire beyond the stricture. Then there is a role for using a cholangioscope to actually negotiate the guidewire. Otherwise, no indication. Okay. The only in case where you want to pass the guidewire is not going, then you can do a cholangioscope to see the stricture and pass the guidewire. Okay. Okay.
Sir.
Thank you, Dr. Karthik. Now, Dr. Cyril will be discussing the next case. Are you ready, Dr. Cyril?
Yes, sir.
Okay, start.
62-year-old male from Kerala, manual laborer until a few years ago. Pain right hypochondrium, 3 months. Dull persistent pain relieved by oral analgesics, but recurs again next day. No change in character of pain with eating, body movements, or respiration. Jaundice for the last 3 months with pruritus. Failed stools, 2 weeks. Anorexia, weight loss, 5 kilograms the last 3 months. No fever or rigors. No history of early satiety. No cough or breathlessness. Mild hypertension, irregular treatment. Smoking, 18 pack years. Alcohol, 6 to 8 units weekly, 30 years. Stopped 6 months ago. Regular chewing of betel since 20 years of age.
Diagnosis? Treated. 1, 2, 3.
Persistent right hypochondrial
Just tell
pain.
your diagnosis, no more discussion of the case. Just tell your differentials.
I will consider gallbladder malignancy, hepatocellular carcinoma, or pancreatic neoplasm in this patient. Pancreatic neoplasm in view of the significant alcohol and the smoking history. Also, hepatocellular carcinoma.
Your first differential is?
Pancreatic neoplasm.
First is what? Pancreatic what neoplasm? Cystic neoplasm.
Pardon me?
Pancreatic neoplasm, cystic neoplasm.
And adenocarcinoma, head of pancreas, periampullary malignancy.
So just tell, so number 1 is periampullary carcinoma, number 1. Number 2?
Number 2 will be a hepatocellular carcinoma, madam.
The cholestatic jaundice.
Why do you want to
extrahepatic.
bring in Cyril? What are the manifestations of hepatocellular carcinoma? Which variant or which complication of hepatocellular carcinoma present with the features of jaundice, pruritus, and pale colored stools? Now, since you brought in a very early stage, you could have put in many other causes of extrahepatic biliary obstruction before you want to bring in hepatocellular carcinoma.
Hylar will come in, gallbladder cancer will come in. These are all the three differentials, important differentials.
First,
Carcinoma of pancreas.
First the periampullary, then a gallbladder malignancy, then down the list, I'll put it a distal cholangio or a hilar cholangio. Then down the list, I'll put it an HCC.
How often you get pain in periampullary?
Periampullary, usually head of pancreas, though considered as painless progressive jaundice, and 30 to 40% you can have dull aching, continuous type of white hypochondrial pain.
Periampullary usually present early, and therefore pain is unusual, no?
And this pain that you're discussing, pain right hypochondrial, is what do you think this pain is? What is this pain?
Likely to be
Just a distended liver, just an enlarged liver, discomfort, is a continuous pain.
hepatomegaly secondary to obstructive jaundice.
So Hylar, if you take percentage wise, Hylar will be 80%, 10% will be porta, and 10% will be carcinoma of pancreas. And gallbladder cancer, they're coming from the gallbladder cells. Okay, next slide.
On examination, the weight is 58 with a BMI of 18.9, blood pressure of 168/92. General examination, patient is having icterus, scratch marks on the body, no lymph nodes, abdomen, scaphoid, liver palpable 5 cm below the right costal margin, firm, non-tender, smooth surface, no other markers, no free fluid.
What's your diagnosis now?
At this stage, what will you consider?
There is no gallbladder. Gallbladder is not.
What is your diagnosis? See, the exam, I tell you, the examiners get very worked up, to just keep on repeating. After examination, what is your diagnosis? That's all that you're asking. Possible differentials, or what is your diagnosis? You have one diagnosis, say one. If you have differentials, mention the differentials.
A hilar cholangiocarcinoma.
That's all. Any other? When is gallbladder not palpable in periampullary carcinoma? Is it all 100%? Ampullary carcinoma, carcinoma head, it's 100% gallbladder that's palpable?
No, madam.
So when is gallbladder not palpable? These are the questions that you should know. Okay, these are the common questions that are asked in the exam. You're in for a surprise. You say carcinoma head of pancreas was in first, periampullary was first, gallbladder is not palpable. The next question will be, what is Courvoisier's law? And when is gallbladder not palpable? These are all classical, standard, straightforward questions. So now what should you do? So what's your differentials now? So what is hilar cholangio? Number 2?
Madam.
What are your differentials?
Painful.
But these, just help him out.
Hepatocellular.
Oh God. Will this be the finding of a hepatocellular carcinoma, liver which is 5 cm below right costal margin, firm, non-tender, smooth surface?
No, madam.
Will this be the presentation of hepatocellular? Why are you after hepatocellular carcinoma? What else can it be? Can gallbladder not be palpable in carcinoma head of pancreas?
Yes,
So
madam.
if it's a contracted gallbladder, number 1, if the gallbladder is on the undersurface of the liver, and the gallbladder fossa may not be palpable. Post polycystic knee status, gallbladder will not be palpable. If there's a double obstruction at the porta as well as cystic duct, again gallbladder will not be palpable. These are the 4 causes. That's it. That's the answer.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, come on. So now read the reports.
Okay.
So the hemoglobin was 11.2. Total count of 13,210. Platelet of 2.2.
Go to LFT. Go to LFT.
Bilirubin of total bilirubin of 12.4 with a direct of 9.3, AST, LT 63 and 54, alkaline phosphatase of 314 with an albumin of 3.1, INR of 1.6. Chest X-ray shows prominent bronchovesicular markings. USG abdomen shows hepatomegaly, bilateral IHBRD, no SOL liver. Common hepatic duct not visualized. CBD measures 7 mm. No definite mass in the hilum. Few enlarged lymph nodes in the porta, size below 1 centimeter. Gallbladder partially collapsed. Few gallstones seen. No mass lesion in the pancreas. So the investigations is showing bilateral ISBRD.
What's your diagnosis now?
Based on this, what do you think is the patient has?
Diagnosis. Don't
Very high
repeat.
carcinoma.
Sorry, what is it?
Perihilar cholangiocarcinoma.
Huh?
Hilar cholangiocarcinoma.
Hilar. Why do you want to bring in perihilar?
Hilar cholangiocarcinoma.
Okay.
Can you want to classify that? With ultrasound? Next investigation. Next investigation.
Common hepatic
What is your choice for next? What do you do next?
What's the next investigation choice?
I will like to have a CT abdomen, contra CT abdomen, and then basically I would like to have a contra CT abdomen.
Why you prefer CT scan over other investigations? So the choice of investigations here are a CT scan, MRI, MRCP, then many other things are there. But between MRI and CT, why do you want to prefer a CT scan?
Considering it is a hilar to assess the lymph node as well as the resectability. CT scan can show the signs of resectability like portal vein, the lymph nodes, as well as whether other liver metastasis or extra other spread. Basically, the resectability can be assessed better for a hilar with a CT scan.
And another thing in CT, another important thing is, it will actually show the vascular, the blood vessels, portal vein, hepatic artery, and the resectability is based on that.
Yes.
Because all other, so I think moreover the person who handles a non-radiologist can interpret the CT scan much better than the MRI. So for you, suppose you are a clinician and you are well versed with the CT scan, I think I prefer to do a CT scan, and I'm sure many people prefer to go for a CT scan, and many of the surgeons also prefer that. But of course, do an MRCP. Suppose you want to know the biliary anatomy better, the extent of bile duct involvement, then MRCP may be of advantage. But it all varies upon centers. But I think whatever you say, both are correct. But many times CT abdomen is preferred because of the reason which I told. The vascular assessment, blood vessel assessment, portal vein, hepatic artery, all this can be assessed much better on that on CT scan. Of course, MRI also can do that, but CT scan is better assessed for resectability in patients with cholangiocarcinoma. Dr. Jayanti, Dr. Varghese Thomas, you can tell your opinion.
Yeah, I also prefer a CT scan anyway. It's user-friendly. Comment on this report.
The contrast abdomen shows a liver which is moderate enlargement of the right lobe. Left lobe is atrophied. IHBRD right and left lobes. Right hepatic duct visualized down to the confluence. Left hepatic duct near confluence not visualized. CSD near confluence not dilated. Asymmetric thickening of the wall noted. CBD normal 7 mm. No definite mass near confluence. Few enlarged nodes. 8 to 9 mm at porta. No necrosis seen. Main portal vein and right hepatic vein normal, left hepatic vein partial narrowing near confluence. GB normal, 3 calculi noted.
What type is it?
3 ma'am. 3B.
Yeah, okay. That is left involvement. Most predominantly the left involvement, the confluence and the left involvement. Right is paired.
Yes, 3B.
I would not know the classification, but one thing is definite, that is the right is paired, the left is involved. Okay. But there's something else happening. Left hepatic vein is narrow near the confluence. So just remember that something is happening to the left hepatic vein as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Why there is left lobe atrophy?
So bilateral IHBRD is there.
And left lobe is atrophic. Yeah.
Left lobe, so that is a sign of unresectability.
No. See, the question Dr. Varghese answers is very important. There is a left lobe atrophy is there. What is the mechanism and why it is so? What does that imply to you?
Either the left hepatic vein, left hepatic involvement or a left portal vein involvement.
So suppose I say that this CT scan report is incomplete for me. What will be your comment? What else you wanted in this CT scan? Because there is no mention about hepatic artery. Suppose, even if you have seen this, still, even if one portal vein branch is involved, still it is resectable. But it is, if suppose a hepatic artery is involved, suppose a major trunk of hepatic artery is involved, then it becomes straight away unresectable. Where actually we have no
LVK, VT, that hepatic vein should be portal vein, I think, no? Main portal vein, right?
I
portal
think
vein.
it is a portal,
vein.
left
It's portal.
left portal
and right,
vein.
it's left and right portal vein, not hepatic vein.
No, it is not hepatic vein, it is portal vein.
Portal vein,
I think it's a typo.
Type.
We agreed, no, that is why I didn't mention.
So left portal vein is narrow.
Yes.
What's your impression? Left portal vein is narrow.
Encasement of the tumor.
Encasement of the tumor. Okay. So what stage would it be then? That means left portal vein is partly involved. So what stage of the disease would it be?
Unilateral left, it's still 3B, madam. Only thing bilateral IHBRD is that is with left lobe atrophy, that is a sign of unresectability. But with left vein alone encased, it still can be resectable. If left portal vein alone it can be reconstructed.
What would you consider in this patient? Surgery versus endoscopy? Here it is, MRC.
Basically, since it is an unresectable tumor, endoscopically we can try for palliation. Palliative mechanisms can be stenting. If not accessible, sending hilar might be difficult. So PTBD or a double, at least we try to, since he has pruritus, we will try to drain at least 25% of the liver, the normal system, to relieve his symptoms.
Possible that you do a rendezvous and try to internalize the state?
Madam?
Is it possible to internalize this? Is there a role for cholangioscopy and RFA in this patient?
No, ma'am.
How are you going to confirm the tissue diagnosis in this patient? Can it be tuberculosis?
Cyril,
you have not confirmed the diagnosis.
Or we can try for a US guided.
Cyril,
Sir.
can I ask you a question? This patient, the decision of getting a tissue diagnosis is based on what type of treatment you are planning to do. Suppose you are going to operate this patient, tissue diagnosis need not be very important because none of the surgeons require a tissue for making a diagnosis when he is decided to be operated. Suppose you want to leave it and give to the oncologist. Oncologist insists for a tissue diagnosis.
Yes, sir.
Those situations.
Yes.
So here actually we have to decide whether we are operating the patient or not. In other words, you should know which are the patient of hilar cholangiocarcinoma should be operated or not. And in other words, you should have surgeon, oncologist, and you sitting together and decide which patient should be operated on. If this patient here, what are the reasons why you are not considering surgery for this patient?
Because of bilateral left lobe atrophy with right IHBRD, bilateral involvement.
Why it is so?
Right is normal, no? Right hepatic duct.
That is.
Right is not normal. Left is only left and the left portal vein.
I would tell that there is an indication for surgery because left lobe is atrophied, the portal vein is involved there, so you do a left hepatectomy and the right portal vein is not involved. We have no information about a hepatic artery and there is no involvement of right lobe. Right lobe is the major lobe and the patient will do very well. You do a left hepatectomy. The surgeon would prefer to have this case for surgery. Only if there is any contraindication for surgery, because of comorbidities or because of age, all those. But it is unlikely here because there is no mention about all these things. So in any patient with a cholangiocarcinoma, that is especially in hilar cholangiocarcinoma, if the patient is resectable, and then that is the only hope for the patient. So I think surgery should be offered or considered very seriously in any patient with the hilar cholangiocarcinoma. And in this patient, there is no major contraindication for surgery.
Yes.
So I will actually seek the opinion from Dr. Jayanti, Dr. Varghese Thomas, and whoever wants to contribute on that. I think that is. What is Dr. Jayanti? What do you think?
Yeah. Surgeons never want tissue. If they plan for surgery, they go to err on the safer side. They go straight for surgery without a tissue diagnosis. I agree to that absolutely.
Varghese?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is. I think
Tumor
this
marker?
can undergo resection. This is left lobe dominantly affected, and then they will resect the tumor and remove the left lobe.
Yeah.
Right lobe is reasonably intact. No.
Absolutely. And what is a tumor marker? Do we have any information?
CA19.
No, we don't have.
Cyril, what is the tumor marker you do in this?
CA99, sir. A value above 137 has got 80 to 90% sensitivity with a positive CT line.
Suppose a patient with the biliary obstruction and cholangitis. How does CA19 help you?
A patient can have an erroneously elevated in the background of cholangitis. Sir. CA19 can be elevated, and the value, we cannot rely on the value or the upper limit of the value in those cases.
Okay, suppose this patient is not being taken up for surgery. For example, the patient refuses surgery, and or the patient has got some other comorbidities which prevent the surgeries being done. So what will be your next option for this patient? What all investigations will you do, and what will be your choice of treatment? Surgery is out, so now you have got two options of treatment: a percutaneous management or an endoscopic management.
And, ideal to get a tissue diagnosis if we are not planning for a surgery, sir. And based on that, we can if we are planning for a palliative, the newer molecule like pemigatinib can be used accordingly, or endoscopic palliative mechanism, and if endoscopically not amenable, multiple stents, either we will try to predominantly drain the right system. If not,
why do you want to put multiple stents?
If ideally, if we can drain the left lobe also, then we'll try.
Left lobe is atrophic. So there's no point in actually draining left lobe, because that lobe is not going to match, because already it is vascular compromise is there. Left lobe drainage is not of any importance of this patient. This whole patient has got a major lobe, that is right lobe, that is the most viable one. And whatever drainage you want to do, you have to do the drainage of that. And suppose you want to do get a tissue diagnosis, and what will be your approach for this patient? How are you going to get a tissue diagnosis in this patient?
US guided or a cholangioscopy guided tissue diagnosis.
US guided means what type? From where will you take biopsy? In other words, in hilar cholangiocarcinoma, the yield of US guided FNA from the primary tumor is very low. Yes. It may range from 30% to 70% of different series. And approach may be difficult also many times. And if you are intention for any surgery, never do any FNA in this patient, because most of surgeons do not like that, because that will produce a lot of leak and bleeding, and the dissection at the hilum becomes difficult. So once surgery is ruled out, then you can do this. And suppose you want to do an ERCP, your approach is planning for an ERCP. In that case, you can actually go in and do a you can do a while doing ERCP, what are the techniques of getting a biopsy for this patient? In other words, EOS, I want to say one more thing. If you see a major lymph node, we can take an FNA from the lymph node, and that will give you a diagnosis. Okay. So lymph nodes and primary tumor, the yield is not very good. But if you see a mass, then you can actually do it. Suppose there is no mass, and many times in hilar cholangiocarcinoma, mass may not be there. Okay. And when you do an ERCP, or when you do a PTBD, how do you get a tissue diagnosis? Tell me. what are the techniques of getting a tissue diagnosis when you do a biliary intervention, either percutaneous or ERCP?
Brush cytology
What is
and
brush cytology? Good. What is the yield of brush cytology in
cytology to 18 to 40%. You can add fish to that, which increases the yield up to 40 to 80% if you add trisomy 37917 to that.
Okay, we can go for molecular biology. Next, what is the other technique of getting a tissue?
Angioscopy, cholangioscopy, direct. Then intraductal ultra.
Intraductal ultrasound will not give you a tissue diagnosis, that can give you, but in hilum that may not be of much use. But if it is a lower distal CBD or a mid CBD, or that can give you an added advantage, but did not give you a tissue. And and also you can, people are now using biopsy forces to go inside the bile duct. You have seen that, no? Actually, you can pass a biopsy forces into the bile duct, and there is wire-guided biopsy. Wire-guided biopsy is available now. Moraes biopsy forceps. You can actually pass a biopsy forceps through a guide wire, and so that you can go to that stricture area and take it. Now, another thing is that even in PTBD also, if you do, you can actually use a brush cytology, or you can, through the PTBD site, dilate and pass a cholangioscope, and you can take biopsy from that area. And when you do an ERCP, if you want a tissue diagnosis is mandatory, in those situations, we can actually go in and take a biopsy. The biggest problem with the cholangioscope in this situation is that unnecessarily you will actually contaminate the left lobe, where intention of not draining is there. And then the patient may go in for cholangitis. So when you use a cholangioscope, you have to instill a lot of water or fluid, and that can inadvertently produce cholangitis. So you have to be very careful. And if you use cholangioscope, make sure that all the systems are drained properly. Okay?
Okay, time up. We will go to...
Very nice summarize.
Okay.
Okay.
So the learning points are hilar lesion, the causes, the diagnostic approach, the operability, and endoscopic management, PTBD, all those things you have to read up. Next will be Dr. Kushan. Are you there?
Yes, sir, I am there, sir.
Okay, start off.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am. This is a case of 58 years old female patient. She is a home manager. She has come with the complaints of pain in the upper abdomen, that is severe type, and for the past 3 days, that is acute in onset, continuous, and there is partial relief on stooping, and pain is felt in the mid-back region also. It required multiple doses of analgesics, and but only partially relieved. There is also fever with chills for 1 day, and dark colored urine for 1 day. There is a history of one attack of upper abdominal pain 6 months ago that subsided after a few hours. On treatment, the patient has a high BP and is on OHA. Ma'am, 6 months back, the history is suggestive of a biliary colic, ma'am, and now the patient has presented probably with a CBD stone and probably with pancreatitis, ma'am, and also has cholangitis, ma'am.
Complete diagnosis?
Ma'am, complete diagnosis will be 58 years old female patients, and with biliary pancreatitis, and comorbidities of high and complications of cholangitis, and comorbidities of hypertension and diabetes mellitus, ma'am. Functional status.
I agree to that. Anything else, Dr. Matthew?
No, I think, this is fine.
Yeah. That would be the way forward. Yeah. We can move on.
On examination, the patient was febrile and had tachycardia pulse rate of 102, BP of 110/70, RBS is 212, and creatinine is 1.3. Total bilirubin is 3.4, and direct is 2.1. AST is 168, ALT is 140, Alkaline phosphatase is 234. Albumin is 3.9. The electrolytes, sodium is mildly low, it is 132, and lipase is elevated to 21. The ultrasound shows gallbladder appears to be contracted with multiple stones, and CBD is 8 mm. Pancreas is obscured by bowel gas. Liver is mildly enlarged with grade 1 fatty liver. Urine routine shows no abnormalities. Blood culture is sterile after 72 hours.
What's the diagnosis?
So the patient after examination is in SIRS. I mean, and the RBS is high. There is also predominantly high direct hyperbilirubinemia with cholangiohepatitis pattern of enzyme elevation.
Coming from lipase?
Lipase is more than 3 times elevated, ma'am. So it is suggestive of pancreatitis, ma'am.
Not hugely elevated, there's some elevation. There's some elevation. I think amylase would have been a better option. When will you ask for amylase and when will you ask for lipase? And comment on the pancreas being obscured by the gas. What should be a next investigation?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, lipase is a more specific test for diagnosis of acute pancreatitis, and because the amylase can be elevated in other situations.
Patient comes on day 1 versus patient comes on day 3.
Ma'am, day 1 amylase will be more preferred. Ma'am, on day 3 lipase will be more preferred because the half-life is longer.
Now pancreas is obscured by gas. So what should we do next? Next investigation.
What next?
Ma'am, I will go for a contrast enhanced CT scan, ma'am.
You have EUS with you. You have CT, MRCP, you have EUS with you. What will be your line? What will be the first choice of investigation and why you want to do it? What was your differential? What was your differential you said?
Ma'am, biliary pancreatitis with cholangitis, ma'am.
So what would be your ideal investigation for biliary pancreatitis?
Madam, ma'am, at this stage, I would go for a MRCP or EUS to find out whether the stone is present or not, ma'am.
You cannot add on cost to the patient. No? Everything is available with you.
So I'll go for EUS, ma'am. So if the stone is still present since the patient is in cholangitis, it is an indication to go for ERCP, ma'am.
So your choice would be US. I would also
US.
Dr. Matthew?
Yes, I think I agree to Kushan and Madam also, because here a patient who is sick, he needs to be shifted to an MRI machine and then back to again. Suppose there is a stone, you have to do an ERCP, and in that case, you may have to do an EOS also many times. So I think even in MRCP. So let me ask you another question: what are the stones that can be missed in MRCP? MRCP CBD stones can be missed. So what are those situations where MRCP can miss a stone?
What size of the stone?
Sir, I'm not aware.
What size of the stone? You can have sludge, you can have crystals, you can have stones of 3 millimeter size. No? Those are the stones that.
Okay, microlithiasis.
Okay. Yeah, the microliths, the sludge and all.
Yes. You will miss microliths, you will miss biliary sludge, stone of 2 millimeter, and you will miss a stone which sometimes impacted the ambulance.
Absolutely, ambulance. Yeah.
So ambulance stone also can be missed. You know that many times ambulance is the place where a small stone can get impacted and produce pancreatitis. So in other words, I think if you are in a case like this, a patient with acute biliary pancreatitis, in that situation, the investigation of choice would be that you do an EUS and then if required straight away for an ERCP at that time.
It will also give you information on the pancreas also. No? You can study the pancreas.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we already have a CT scan to tell us what is the severity of this case. Is it a severe pancreatitis?
Sir, it looks like a severe pancreatitis because the necrosis appears to be more than 30%, sir. The non-enhancing portion mainly involving the head and some portion of the body of the pancreas, sir.
How will you know that this, in looking at the CT scan, how will you know that this is the dead area, necrose area, which is the viable areas?
Sir, it is the dead area will be non-enhancing, sir.
So in this one, the starved area is actually the area of star. That is actually the viable areas. And
Viable area, yes, sir.
And also, how will you know that the pancreatic necrosis is pancreatic or extra pancreatic? You know that the pancreatic necrosis can go beyond the pancreas also. No? Here actually you can see.
Yes, sir.
We have got both pancreatic and extra pancreatic necrosis here. Both you can see here. As beautifully shown
Yes,
here.
sir.
Picture also.
Yes, sir.
And here also you can see the gallstones. No?
Yes, sir.
Suppose you don't see gallstone in a CT scan. Can you rule out gallstones in this patient?
No, sir. Radiolucent gallstones may be missed
Yes.
on the CT.
Especially for
Can it be interstitial pancreatitis? Only 3 days old.
Ma'am, in interstitial pancreatitis, the pancreas will be enlarged and there won't be areas of, hypoenhancement, ma'am. So here, since areas of hypoenhancement is there, it looks more like a necrotizing pancreatitis, ma'am.
One more question. In a case of acute pancreatitis, what will be the time profile when you want to do a CT scan?
So preferably after 72 hours after the.
In which situation you want to do a CT scan earlier? Can you suggest any situation where you want to do a CT earlier? When the type of acute pancreatitis is uncertain, then you may go in for a CT earlier. Otherwise, always it is preferred to do a little later. Why do you want to delay it?
Sir, because the changes in the pancreas, they take around 3 days to appear and to be picked up better on the CT, sir.
Okay, and so here you have got a patient with acute pancreatitis, and so I think now we have got another slide. Now let us go.
Okay, now we'll discuss management as we are running short of time.
So there is a case of biliary pancreatitis here. So in situations of acute biliary pancreatitis, when you actually think a patient has got a biliary pancreatitis, because you know that there are so many situations where the patient has got acute pancreatitis. When will you really suspect? Other than the clinic, here it is clinical history, so it's classical. And when what will be the major points where even by investigations other than imaging?
Yes, sir. Sir, so that can be divided into the clinical features in which a female patient who is a non-alcoholic and who had previous history of gallstones or biliary colic, that also suggests that she may be having biliary pancreatitis. Investigation-wise, sir, SGPT of more than 150 is suggestive of biliary etiology, sir.
In other words, any patient who has got an abnormal LFT with an
Yes,
acute pancreatitis, you have to seriously consider you are dealing with biliary pancreatitis. But you know, alcoholic pancreatitis, they can have associated fatty liver, associated alcoholic liver disease, also can have abnormal LFT. But in those patients where any patient with an abnormal LFT coming with a pancreatitis, you should seriously think that am I dealing with a biliary pancreatitis? For all practical purpose, an abnormal LFT, acute pancreatitis, you should consider this as a biliary pancreatitis. So in this patient, at what stage?
Yes,
In other words, biliary pancreatitis, at what stage you will do ERCP? Or what are the indications of ERCP in a patient with biliary acute pancreatitis?
And when would you do it?
When would you do it? And temporal profile.
Sir, if the patient with biliary pancreatitis has cholangitis.
This patient has come on day 3. Okay, just take the same case. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Since she has cholangitis, ma'am, she will require ERCP. And secondly, if there is a rising trend in the LFT and the bilirubin levels keeps rising on observation, that is also an indication for ERCP.
Does it matter with the severity of pancreatitis? Suppose a patient has very mild pancreatitis, but the patient has got biliary obstruction also, or we are suspecting biliary pancreatitis.
Sir, if the patient does not have cholangitis, sir, we can wait because the stone may pass off by itself, sir.
In any patient, severe acute pancreatitis with evidence of biliary pancreatitis, they should actually go in for an ERCP because no, that can actually modify. In those cases, severe acute biliary pancreatitis, what is the temporal profile of doing an ERCP? At what time you should do?
Sir, it will be within 24 hours if cholangitis is present, sir.
When in a patient with acute biliary pancreatitis of severe grade, a patient severe acute pancreatitis, that patient you should do ERCP at the earliest, within 24 hours you should do that, because that can change the course of the pancreatitis. But mild to moderate, you can do between 24 to 48 hours in those patients. And if a patient is in cholangitis, you should try to do at the earliest. Whenever the patient can be stabilized or optimized, hemodynamically stable, then you take it up. Okay.
Right, sir.
So the question here, we have already discussed MRCP versus EUS, and I think you suggested that and when will be ERCP plan this case, we have already discussed. And I think any patient with acute biliary pancreatitis, there is a potential role for ERCP to identify the severity of the disease, as well as the presence of biliary obstruction, as well as cholangitis. And
Yes, sir.
if the patient liver function test is improving and the patient does not have any evidence of cholangitis, and the patient
Yes,
does
sir.
not have any overt persistent biliary obstruction, then I think you can wait and probably just passed off. And if at all you want to do a test on them, you can do an EUS, and if that CBD is clear, you can leave it at that time. And the other interesting question is, can ERCP aggravate existing pancreatitis?
Sir, it can aggravate existing if it is like if we perform ERCP in mild pancreatitis and we accidentally cannulate the pancreatic duct, or we perform a sphincteroplasty, and it can precipitate severe pancreatitis in those patients. Failed cannulation. Yes.
In those cases, you may have to place a pancreatic stent as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Suppose you go inside the pancreatic duct multiple times, what do? You definitely put a pancreatic stent. And suppose you inject contrast. There's a last question is the risk of septic complication pancreatitis in biliary pancreatitis. What will be your answer for that?
Septic complications in biliary pancreatitis, same or no? Sir, I think it is same as other cases of pancreatitis.
If you are injecting into the pancreatic duct, if you inject contrast in the pancreatic duct, then things will worsen, no? But otherwise, if you are selectively cannulate the biliary duct, and then it may not produce much changes. In ideally, it should not produce any changes.
And the timing of polycystictomy usually is in the same admission.
Yes,
the current,
yes.
current,
If
current
mild,
guidelines, current guidelines.
yes, mild pancreatitis, same admission. And severe pancreatitis, after the pancreatitis resolves, then
resolves and then go for electropolycystic. Good presentation.
Okay, the choice of antibiotics also should be known.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
What antibiotic would you prefer in these patients?
Sir, in these patients, sir, we will go for piperacillin tazobactam or carbapenem. Sorry, sir, since pancreatitis is also there, sir, we preferably go for carbapenem, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Next.
I think that is very well discussed. Thank you, Dr. Kushan.
Thank you, sir.
Move to the next person. Next will be discussed by Dr. Santosh. Are you there?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, ready. Start.
51-year-old manual labor from Kerala, complaints of pain abdomen, pain upper abdomen into from 1 month, fullness of upper abdomen from 2 weeks, acute onset of severe pain in epigastrium, partially relieved by stooping, pain was continuous in type, and patient had received multiple doses of analgesic injection in the last 24 hours. Pain became less by 2 days, but mild pain persistent for next 5 days. Noticed upper abdominal fullness for 2 weeks 2 weeks later, which is gradual, become more since last 1 week. Appetite okay, but early satiety since 2 weeks. Weight loss of about 4 kgs in last 2 months.
What do you think from this?
Sir, 51-year-old.
Don't repeat. Just summarize.
The patient present with a pain, upper abdominal pain, and fullness, which is more so suggestive of pancreatic pain, as the patient pain is relieved by bending forward, and also he has given a history of consumption, analgesic intake, which was relieved, and meanwhile, patient also noticed upper abdominal fullness. So it all suggests of a patient probably had a history of acute pancreatitis, following with the fullness, which has developed after 2 weeks later, probably suggests there is a sequelae of acute pancreatitis with a form of development of collection. Fluid formation is one of the possibilities which is causing, I think. And as the patient is also having a loss of appetite and loss of weight, and probably this is causing a luminal compression for either gastric or duodenal compression, which is what which we can interfere from the given history.
Loss is 1 month. Okay, it's not. The weight loss has preceded the onset of pain.
Weight loss is one thing which is 4 kg is one thing which probably very considered significant. Probably this cause of pancreatitis is malignancy is one of the things which we have to keep in mind. Probably that malignancy sometimes can lead to development of pancreatitis by itself. That could be a probably etiology by itself. So since I want to know whether the patient had a previous history of biliary pain, probably which can suggest whether it could be a biliary etiology or it could be of probably a malignancy etiology, malignancy which is causing obstructive this one, which can lead to pancreatitis, and probably now as having collection is one of the possibilities which we can think of.
One is malignancy. Number 2.
Pancreatic adenocarcinoma is adenocarcinoma or cystic neoplasms is one of the which we have to keep in mind.
Cystic neoplasm with abdominal pain, pancreatitis.
Madam?
Cystic neoplasm with presenting as acute pancreatitis.
Cystic pancreas mainly.
Okay, just move on. There is attack on severe approach 2 years ago. He's had a similar pain. Rejections. Okay. On examination, there's fullness in the epigastrium, no definite mass felt.
Madam, I can't hear. History of all.
Yeah, I'm just quickly summarizing. There's alcohol use disorder, one similar episode 2 years back. And then there's abdominal examination, fullness in epigastrium with ill-defined borders. And left lower chest is stony dull. So what's your complete diagnosis?
Probably considering the previous history of similar abdominal pain, and there is a history of alcohol use disorder, probably this patient is having recurrent pancreatitis, and meanwhile there is and also a sequelae of it.
Is it probably acute 1 minute? Is it acute and chronic, or is it recurrent acute?
Probably this is an acute and chronic episode is what I can think, as the patient is very much relieved with analgesics and went away. Probably it was a mild attack symptomatically, whether the patient was not hospitalized. So, and meanwhile, the patient had a previous attack. All this suggests probably a patient is having a chronic pancreatitis. On that, there might be an acute episode which has precipitated, which has led to the sequelae.
What are the complications now with this patient?
This particular patient duration of pain is almost 2 weeks.
Complications. So, what are the complications in this patient?
Yeah, 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, patient might most likely.
Just name the complications here. Don't keep
infections of the hemorrhage can happen. Obstruction, compression symptoms, and obstruction to the luminal or common bile duct.
In this patient, what are your differentials, complications for the complications?
This patient probably might be having a
no, you have
luminal compression, madam. Luminal compression, which is causing mechanical pressure effect through surrounding organ, is the complication which I can presently attribute it to.
Santosh, here actually the physical examination had shown you some findings, no? Then why can't what the patient has?
Physical examination, fullness in epigastrium with no definite
border. The last line.
Left lower chest stony dullness.
So there are 2 complications.
That is usually a left-sided pleural effusion might be a consequence of pancreatitis.
Okay, and fullness in the epigastrium.
Cystic collection.
Cystic collection is not a good terminology. In other words,
fluid collection.
Pancreatic fluid collection. No, that is a
pancreatic
fluid collection. Okay.
The patient has got a ductal leak
Pardon?
Does the patient have a leak? What is the finding on the left side of the lung? What does it indicate?
Left-sided pleural effusion, madam.
What does it indicate?
It indicates pleural sequelae of acute pancreatitis presently.
How does it happen?
Is it just a sympathetic effusion?
It is sympathetic. It indicates the severity. Left-sided pleural effusion indicates the severity, and second thing, it is might be because of surrounding inflammation, which has led to transitive this one.
Other than that,
Sorry.
next. Okay, okay, we agreed that. So, any other cause?
I'm sorry, sir. I'm not particularly aware.
What are the causes of pleural effusion in left-sided pleural effusion in a patient with acute pancreatitis, or in a chronic pancreatitis, or an acute or chronic pancreatitis?
There can be a fistula development, trans diaphragm.
I don't
Must be a waiting for.
Sir?
You should always tell that causes also. Yes, of course,
Sir.
acute pancreatitis, you can have mild pleural effusion, and sometimes it can be little big also, and especially in patients with respiratory involvement, they can have. But in patients with acute pancreatitis or acute on chronic pancreatitis, or even patients with chronic pancreatitis, they can have a fistulous communication with or pleural effusion because of chronic pancreatitis or because of pancreatitis. So, madam was instantly asking you what other cause. When the examiner says asking something, you should try to understand the examiner needs something more than that.
Okay, sir. Okay.
How do you manage this patient? Investigations.
Hemoglobin is 12.2. Total count is 11,800. Platelet is normal. ESR is 43. CRP is 13. Total bilirubin is 2.3. Conjugated bilirubin is 1.3. AST, ALT 67 and 43. ALP is 183. Total protein is 6.5. Albumin is 3.3.
Ultrasound.
Ultrasound, left liver mildly enlarged and fatty liver, gallbladder edema, CBD 6 mm, pancreas head hypoechoic and bulky, and body and tail hypoechoic. Few hypoechoic spots noted in PD, not visualized. Hyperechoic spots noted in a PD, PD not visualized. Retrogastric hypodense collection, 10 into 10 centimeters solid debris seen occupying more than almost half of the lesion. Wall is 1.6 centimeter to 2 centimeter. Inner margin shaggy and irregular with at multiple places. Left-sided moderate pleural effusion.
What's your conclusion?
Madam, this is this has a features of pancreatitis with probably hyperechoic lesion suggestive probably might be a calcific spots, calcifications. And third thing is that there is a large collection 10 into 10 centimeter with solid component.
Doctor, see, we just want a quick answer. Is it a wall? Is it just
necrotizing collection, madam?
Is it a wall?
Sandosh,
madam.
What madam want you to answer is that this patient has acute on chronic pancreatitis with a pancreatic fluid collection and probably mild of necrosis or what WON and left side pleural effusion. So this is what madam wants to know from you, because this is a 4 weeks old case.
Yes.
And the patient had a chronic pancreatitis. Now he had an episode of acute, this one is an acute on chronic pancreatitis having a peripancreatic fluid collection, and
yes,
is a WON, and the patient has got a pleural effusion also. This is what madam wants you to answer on this, and I think that is really correct also. Suppose there is written that the fluid collection has solid debris, and it is occupying almost half of the lesion, that is half of the cavity, and another is that the margins are shaggy. The wall is 1.6 centimeter to 2 centimeter. What inference you make out of that? What is the implications of that?
This wall is mainly a thick wall with irregular shaggy and irregular multiple places. Whether I mean, it indicates probably solid debris with walled off necrosis is what I can think of, sir.
So, what will be your next investigation on this?
CT abdomen and versus MRI, we have to think. And basically, MRI is better to
look for. I would say I would ask for an EUS.
Madam,
what's your comment on that? What's your comment on that? EUS. One stop shopping.
EUS will give only the localized morphology. It definitely gives an indication regarding pancreatic collection and communication and feasibility of further therapeutic options. And MRCP is with MRI is better basically to look for
in this
communication.
Patient, doctor, see, when you're sitting as a consultant,
madam,
what would be the cost-effective procedure in this patient to manage? That's all that we want to know. You cannot go and tell the patient MRI will show this, CT will show this, EUS will show this, and tell the patient, what do you want? Is it that the way we talk? No.
I would prefer for.
You have to manage the patient. Here's a patient who's come with a necrotic mass, and he's also got a fistula there, and you have all the gadgets in the best centers. What would be the treatment option available for this patient? Cost beneficial, at the same time effective with an effective management.
Can you show us next slide?
Next slide.
Not there, huh? Yes, it's there. So this is a CT. What is your comment on the CT? Just describe on the CT.
This collection. This shows a large collection, which is with a thick wall and protein air fluid level. There is features of infection. There is some air foci which we can be seen inside.
So the presence of air
and the collection is predominantly there is a solid component and there is hyperechoic in collection. So there is solid debris which you can see.
So what is your diagnosis on this CT?
Infected wall of necrosis. Simple.
Infected by a wall of necrosis is what I can say.
Please don't intervene. Let us complete the discussion. Okay.
Next slide.
No, you discuss management as we are running short of time.
So how do you manage this patient? In this patient, what you have seen is that ultrasound showed debris in this, but CT is not showing in that. Do you think suppose you want to study the necrotic debris in a vault of necrosis? What are the best investigations?
Percutaneous, one is percutaneous option, other one is US guided.
My question is different. To identify, that when you see a vault of necrosis, the ultimate aim of this is to manage. How do you manage this patient?
Sir, presence of.
How do you manage this patient?
Presence of we have to look for one maturity of the cyst. Other one is this particular patient is having whether and compressive symptoms, and third thing is presence of communication with the pancreatic duct, and the fourth thing is whether the patient is having any infective immediate intervention, whether the patient can requires immediate intervention or not. This particular patient is having a compressive management, and there is a vault of necrosis, so probably require a drainage procedure, and presence of solid component is almost 50%. So probably if at all US guided, probably a metallic, SEMS is what can be.
So this is you're told that you have to know whether the cyst wall is mature or not. This is
yes,
as per the CT report. Is it mature? As per the ultrasound report, it is mature or immature?
Looks mature.
What will be the ideal wall thickness where you want to do an EUS guided intervention? And Varghese, can we go back for 1 or 2 slides? CT and which has shown that the wall
is almost 1.6.
Showing as variable thickness and shaggy. I think they are not so sure.
Yes, and even wall thickness is pretty much high. It's 1.6 to 2 centimeter. Usually that metallic stent, usually it is not very feasible in this particular endoscopic.
So suppose you want to drain in this patient. So it depends upon. In this patient, if you want to do an EUS gated drainage, you have to wait. Because
Yes, sir.
the wall is not mature. And the wall is quite thick. And usually by 4 weeks, it is sufficient to do that. But this particular patient does not. So you have to wait
Yes,
for more time. And during that time, you have to maintain the nutrition of the patient as well as
Yes,
the patient is quite symptomatic. There is evidence of infection. Then you want
yes,
to do what type of drainage you would like to do.
Can we do
one cystic wall is matured, endoscopic drainage can be attempted.
Patient is sick. Patient is sick. Would you consider a percutaneous?
Patient is sick in the sense we can go for a percutaneous approach presently, madam. Percutaneous drainage can be attempted.
Minimal invasive. No? Dr. Pramod Garg has come out with a lot of publications on this management of WAN in the early phase when the patient is acutely sick. When you're not able to do an EUS guided, there is definite role, especially with infected. It's an infected WAN. Therefore, you may have to train. Matthew? Okay.
Varghese, can I share my screen now?
Yeah, please.
See, when you look at the evolution of endoscopic drainage, you know that initially we had aspiration, then we had fistulotomy, mesocystic drainage, stent drainage, then EUS gated puncture. And actually the real effective management started when EUS was brought in there. And it becomes an one-step EUS gated drainage. There is no bleeding, and you can actually do necrosectomy. You can do many things. And multi-port, single-port SEMS and putting lamps, all those things. And I will just show you. See, this is actually showing an endoscopy. You have got 3 or 4 types of drainage. Now, one is the percutaneous drainage, and it's endoscopic drainage. And then you can have a surgical drainage, a laparoscopy, or open whatever it is. But ultimately, in those patients where there is necrotic debris, then you have to bring out the necrotic debris. Sorry. Necrotic debris, and this is actually a pseudocyst drainage. Sorry, a Waldorf necrosis drainage where actually use multiple plastic stents. And the older one, you are dilated with balloon and you put a multiple parts of plastic stent. Then at later time, you go in with the endoscope and then actually bring out this is actually a laparoscopic drainage. You make a big opening there, and then you can drain all those things, Or you can do an endoscopic necrosectomy, which I showed you earlier, where you make its opening, you do a CRE balloon dilate, either you put a multiple plastic, now we use lamps, and you do a step-up procedure now. You don't have to do that. So endoscopically also, you have got a step-up procedure. So Santosh, what is meant by step-up procedure in approach in patients with the Waldorf necrosis management?
So step-up approach will be a first of endoscopic, then percutaneous problem, and later.
No, my question is step-up approach endoscopy. Suppose you do a Waldorf necrosis, you put a metallic stent. You don't have to do anything after that. Immediately you just wait. So to let all the debris come out. If the patient doesn't improve, patient has fever, then you go and actually declogging has to be done. You actually take out the area of the opening, sometimes get clogged because of necrotic. Declog it, put an cystic tube, and then irrigate. But still the patient has symptoms, then you do direct endoscopic necrosectomy. Only the last step is direct endoscopic necrosectomy. In 100 patients or patient with a Waldorf necrosis, you need to do only 10 to 30% people only ultimately require a direct endoscopy necrosectomy. That is the step of approach. The other one is, how do you choose your patients for percutaneous drainage?
Predominantly, whether endoscopic, especially the distance between the cystic and the lumen is more than 1 centimeter. These are and usually body and tail whereas the endoscopic.
In other words, it is actually the location. For example, a paracolic gutter or a lower abdomen, it is not approached to, it is not abutting or very close to the all of
Close the abasa chalun.
all these things, actually you need to go for a percutaneous drainage. But even in percutaneous drainage, you can actually do a step-up approach. You can actually dilate. That is what I have shown you now. Is the
Direct endoscopic nephrectomy and VARD scan.
This is what actually you do: dilate it and go inside. Use a rigid scope or a conventional scope and come out that. People use rigid scope, and nowadays people are using flexible scope also. Many people are doing it. In our state also we are doing it. Sorry. So in walled-off necrosis, you use metallic stents. So what are different types of metallic stents you know about? What is
lumen opposing metallic stent is
They can read out this.
So you have a Nagy stent, you have got a SPAC stent, you have got a, what is this? Axios, no?
Axios, autoxious.
Hot axios, and now there is a hot Nagy also. Actually, advantage of this is that single step you don't have to do many dilatations around, just put a stent. You do an endoscopic drainage feasible or otherwise.
Please mute, please.
If there is no endoscopic drainage is not feasible, then you go for percutaneous or surgical treatment. That I do it is a pericolic fluid collection, endoscopically not feasible at all. And if it is feasible by endoscopy, then you would know whether it's a pseudocyst or it's a walled-off necrosis. This is actually the symptomatic PFCs. And if it is a pseudocyst, you do a EOS guided drainage, and where you put plastic stents, single or multiple, because there is no debris. And the most important technique by which you can identify whether there is debris or not is by ultrasound or by MRI. So that is the advantage of doing EOS. That is why madam was told, why are you not thinking about EOS? Because CT will not show the debris. You don't know the necrotic material is not well seen in CT scan. But the CT scan will show you the air. That is the best technique to look for air, whether there is presence of infection or not. And when you have got walled-off necrosis, and in those patients, pseudocyst, you put a plastic stent, if response is not poor, then you revise your drainage technique. You can put multi-gate. What is the multi-gate technique? Sometimes what is meant by multi-gate?
I'm not aware, sir.
Usually in assist drainage, so you puncture one site and put multiple stents at one site. Suppose you have a large cyst that may not be draining adequately. You puncture another site also. Then you put plastic stent there also. Like that, you can put in 2-3 sites. That is actually multi-gate technique. Or you can take the patient for surgery if this patient not trust. In patients with the walled-off necrosis, either you can use multiple plastic stents and then go in with a scope if there are direct endoscopic necrosis is required, or the patient can afford going for a lumen opposing metallic stent. And in LAMS versus multiple stents, if there is clinical response, yes, the patient has improved. You can actually either do an MRCP or ERCP to find out where is a disconnected duct syndrome. Then if it is depending upon that, you can actually use removal LAMS, or if there is a disconnected syndrome, you have to put a plastic stent on that. And if the clinical response is inadequate, you put this is a step-up approach I'm telling. Nasocystic tube for drainage, and in spite of that, the patient is not improving, you do a direct endoscopic necrosectomy, otherwise known as DEN. And if the patient is still not improving, then you have to do a combined approach. Either you can take the patient for a dual procedure with the endoscopic as well as percutaneous, and also, or you can take the patient for a surgical approach also. So this is actually how you manage a patient with the pancreatic fluid collections.
Okay, sir.
In this patient, the pancreatic cyst wall is, the walled-off necrotic wall was not mature. So this was not an ideal case for endoscopic drainage. If at all the patient is sick enough and the patient has to undergo percutaneous drainage. Okay. If the patient can wait, we can wait till the the wall get matured, and you maintain nutrition at that time. And otherwise, we take the patient for laparoscopic drainage. And regarding one thing which I want to show you on, this is not important for you. And this is actually to show you a case where when there is obstruction at the hilum because of tumor, this is and you can use a biopsy forceps and take your biopsy and get a tissue. And this is a resector. This is what I want to show you. In those patients with a stricture, even in benign stricture, if the guide wire is not able to go beyond that, then you can use a spyglass and go in. Otherwise, there is no indication. Other than there is no indication in a case of benign biliary stricture to use a spyglass for any purpose. But when there is an indeterminate stricture, you have no idea what is the type of stricture. Spyglass is quite useful. The patient which we discussed, there was no doubt. There is a temporal profile was in favor of a post-cholecystectomy stricture. It was benign, it's a short stricture, and there was no evidence of any malignancy. There was no confusion about the diagnosis, and that is why we told straight away going for ERCP and put multiple stents or use a single metallic stent, fully covered metallic stent. Always remember fully covered metallic stent. What is the problem with the fully covered metallic stent? We place in the venous.
Cystic duct can get obliterated.
Now there is already cholecystectomy is done, no? In other words, if the cystic duct is open, it is retained, then that is, I agree that can produce cholecystitis. The biggest problem is that it will migrate. Distal migration. That is the biggest problem of fully covered stent. So in that type, you have got now stents which is non-migratory also. So there are stents for that also. Otherwise, you can in situations where there is not possible, you put a plastic stent over that into the intrahepatic dialysis now into the next loop into the duodenum so that it may not migrate. So these are situations where that can happen. Video is somehow not working, so don't worry. I think we had 4 wonderful cases and all were discussed very well, and it had a lot of information on that. And when an intervention comes into the discussion part, I think you should be thorough about what are the steps of the intervention, why it is being done, where it should not be done. That is more important. For example, a patient, and one more thing I just want to ask you. You have told that 50% debris was seen. At what percentage will you decide that this patient requires a metallic stenting or the patient requires a necrosectomy? About
25, less than 25% usually.
About 30% requires a because you need a wider, or you require a multiple stent. For putting a multiple stent, you have to dilate with a CRE balloon also. Okay, so thank you so much. It was wonderful. Any other questions?
I think his left pleural effusion also needs to be tackled. Yeah. And okay, so in addition, that also must be remembered. And if it is amylase is found to be elevated, I think we have to find whether it's a ductal disruption and perhaps to do stenting across. But this patient already has a complication of WPN, and so probably we have to see how he is going to progress.
One more thing, Santosh, you have suggested to do an MRCP. You know that in the presence of a large cyst, the pancreatite cannot be studied at all. So unless you drain it, there is no point in doing an MRCP. Please don't say that. Okay?
This is a Viva question.
When there is pancreatic fluid collection, and if it is a smaller one, then anatomy is better studied. Okay? And if it is an MRI in this one patient, it is for knowing the debris. Or the necrotic amount of necrosis in that. That is what you're going to. Okay, madam, please. Madam,
thank you, Matthew. Very well discussed. Nice cases. And I think basically, bottom line: number 1, nutrition; number 2, endotherapy; number 3, surgery; and radiology. All the 3 interventions. I think for all the cases, just have a table. Which case would you submit for endoscopy? Combined endoscopy with radiology. Then surgery. For all the 4 nice classical cases that were discussed today. And nutrition is very important.
I
just update yourself with all the updates. Pramod Garg has a lot of publications on this percutaneous necrosectomy. He's a proponent for that in these acute cases. Okay, very well discussed. Thank you, Matthew. I learned a lot. Yeah, a non-endoscopist learning something in endoscopy. Thank you.
Santosh, and one more thing, in this case, you should always say that, how do you manage, sir? I will look at the nutrition of the patient. Because the patient is already symptomatic for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So you have to see that I will put a nasojejunal tube and start feeding the patient. Once the nutrition improves, the patient also improves. And you so I think that is quite important. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So I
VT.
think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank
I
you,
think
madam.
we had a very wonderful discussion, 4 cases. And so thank you, Dr. Matthew Philip. Thank you all the presenters. Thank you, ma'am. Thank for all other faculty who have joined and remained silent, but they have been critically listening to our discussion. Next week on 20th, we will have one more OSCE. That will be by Dr. G.N. Ramesh. And after that, we will go to our regular sessions of one long case and perhaps one short. Okay, till the exams are over. Now, Dr. Sojan.
Thank you, Dr. Varghese and Sojan, for this wonderful opportunity. I learned a lot. I felt I have gone back to the DM days of learning or presenting.
We are all learning a lot by discussing. Our knowledge levels improve now by case discussion.
So I think I make it a point to listen to all the OSCEs available. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the teachers are also learning. Dr. Sojan, please.
Yeah, I mean, since it's already late, I will make it short. On behalf of Kerala IST, I would like to thank on behalf of IST Kerala chapter, as well as on my own personal behalf, from the bottom of my hearts, to all the faculty who came in today and gave a wonderful session, for bringing in all those cases and very informative discussion as well. I would also like to thank our postgraduates for presenting the case as well. I think we'll conclude since it's already late. Thank you, Matthew Philip sir and Jayanti ma'am and Varghese sir for all those wonderful suggestions and informative class. Thank you. Good night.
Okay, bye. Good night. Good night, ma'am. Good night, Matthew, and all faculty.
Jayanti.
Yeah, thank you. Good night.
Night.
Nice to listen to the endoscopy session for a change,
Yeah.
I really do not know what I am. I've switched over to hepatology. Then I'm learning something on endoscopy. Learning.
First of all arts, you are everything.
No. Learning is an art. Learning is something. It's always nice learning. I love learning. Yeah.
Okay. Okay then.
Night.
Bye. Bye.
Good night.
Bye. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is 16. SRMC.
Yeah. You send your slides to me, okay?
Okay, I will send tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.